morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to today's Scrum Pulse, Management 3.0, Managing for Happiness, Games, Tools, and Practices to Motivate Any Team. Ralph Jocham's going to join us today and talk about his experiences, what he's done, what he's seen, what's worked, and what hasn't. If you can go to the next slide, Ralph. My name is Eric Naberg, and I'm going to be your host today. Just a little background on the Scrum Pulse series. It's a free monthly webinar, sometimes even more frequently as we continue to move them forward. They're always available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website. If you go to Scrum.org and look under resources, you'll see a list of all of the past webcasts as well as upcoming webcasts in that place. A little bit about Scrum.org. Scrum.org, our mission, and really our vision, is for improving the profession of software development and software delivery. We're run and led by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum, and we really focus in on helping people improve their ability to use and leverage Scrum, whether it's at a single team or at a scaled level. Some quick guidelines before we get started. Your microphones are muted throughout, but please ask questions. You can ask questions through the questions tab, as you can see there, and we'll take those questions most likely at the end. But please ask questions. You can also hashtag Scrum Pulse and at Scrum.org, and we'll pick up those tweets and we'll take questions that way as well. So get us your questions, provide us, so we can provide you with the best experience. Next slide. And with that, I'd like to introduce Ralph Jocham, who will take you through today's presentation. Ralph?
Hello, good morning or good evening, wherever you are. I'm Ralph Jocham. I'm a software professional for over 20 years. I've started programming in Germany in '97. Before that, I taught myself BASIC on a Commodore C64, later C on an Amiga. For about 12 years or a little bit more, I've been in the area of Agile coaching and training. I came to Agile through extreme programming around 2000. So professionally, I'm born a kind of a nationality. I'm a German guy, but I lived and worked in France, in the UK for a couple of years, US for 9 years, and now I'm based in Switzerland, where I founded my company Effective Agile in 2011. Since 2010, I'm a trainer with Scrum.org, and since 2014, I also added Management 3.0 to my training curriculum because I really thought saw a need when working with clients that this could be a nice add-on to their daily work. And again, if you have questions, I'll also have a look at the question window. So if there's something popping up which I think is worthwhile to address right now, I will. Otherwise, there will also be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So let's get going. So Management 3.0. It's a little bit of the history of Management 3.0. Where is it coming from? So originally it was created by Jürgen Appelo in the early 2000s. His whereabouts kind of similar to mine. He studied computer science, started off as a programmer, moved quickly into the ranks of management, where then he was suddenly confronted with many problems, like being a manager, working with developers, and so on. And he put his thoughts into a blog, noob.nl what it was, and more and more people started reading his blog. So kind of you realize that there's a need, there's people want to learn about that, about the experiences he's putting in there. So he took all of those blog entries and he made a book out of that, which appeared in 2010, Management 3.0, Addison Wesley, Leading Agile Developers or Developing Agile Leaders. So why Management 3.0? I think one of the reasons I'm guessing a little bit as well is that this was the time when everything had a version number. We had Web 2.0 or something like that. So, but also the way Jürgen describes it, he thinks it's the third iteration of management styles, where the first iteration is this classical command and control thinking, like you are a human resource. You're not even a being, you are just a resource. You're one of the cogs in a big assembly line, and you do a work which you get assigned. You're not asked to think, you're just kind of being told what to do. Classical command and control thinking, Frederick Taylor comes to mind in that regard. So then what he considers management 2.0 is like stuff which came up in the 1890s when we came up with certain processes and other approaches. And they worked better because they put the human aspect in the human resources again. You suddenly were not just a resource like electricity or water, suddenly you were a human being again, and you were considered and you were treated in that way. But the problem was that you still had the classical hierarchies, the classical command structures in place, as we have kind of had in Management 1.0. So it improved, but it didn't really fix the problem. So now in Management 3.0, the third iteration of management styles, essentially the human resources are not being part of a hierarchy with command and control structures anymore, but they're form more like communities. And each one of those communities is responsible for contributing to the success of a specific endeavor. It could be a product or something else when it's within an organization. So it's a more loosely structured way of collaborating, and the way he sees it, that management facilitates exactly that. So Management 3.0 is kind of a way of thinking, a way of ideas behind kind of what management could be, and specific practices, tools, and also some games. So why Management 3.0? Let's maybe first do a step back. Agile is these days everywhere, and what I'm showing here right now are kind of studies from the recent studies of version 1, and most of the companies want to be Agile, and I'm just pointing out a few, like 62%, they want to accelerate their product delivery, be faster on the market, or maybe you have to be like, you have to place a product now every year instead of every second year. And managing changing priorities. Everything is intertwined, everything is connected, so it's kind of really, really hard to stay in control of that. So this is why companies want to become Agile. But let's look at why Agile is actually failing. And if we look here at some numbers, is that 46% they say that the company philosophy or the current culture is in conflict with the core Agile values, which we know out of the Agile Manifesto and in other places. So there's a problem with culture, and I'm a strong believer that culture actually follows structure. So in order to change the culture at your company, at your enterprise, you actually have to change some structures up front. But this involves management. And if you look at the next point with 38%, was lack of management support. So we need to have management supporting what Agile means, enable it, or lack of the support for the cultural transition. So again, culture follows structure. So, and in my opinion, it boils a lot down to middle management, because the leaders of enterprise, they like Agile, they like lean thinking, and people in development teams, they like working that way. But middle management, they feel the heat from either side, and they need to change, they need to support that. And then the last point, ineffective management, collaboration. What I often see is that you have those silos within enterprises, and each one of those silos tries to be successful, possible even at the cost of another silo. So you have local optimization, but overall this might be actually a negative, a bad thing for the enterprise. So this is kind of where you can see that management is a really crucial part of actually making a company Agile. And last year in November, Scrum celebrated its 21st birthday. And if you look around, about 90% of the companies claim to be Agile and using Scrum. However, if you really kind of look under the cover, not many of those are really, really successful with it. And I strongly believe that this is because of not having the right management support in place. Let's look a little bit at the barriers in Agile adoption. Again, 55% actual ability to change organizational culture. Here we have it again. And think about it, Agile is a mindset. It's a different way of thinking, acting every single day. 38% management support, something what I mentioned before, that we have to change some structures underneath, some way of how we work together. but also loss of management control. Like suddenly you let go, you let maybe your people in the development team make specific decisions, and that's a scary thing in the beginning. How do you cope with that? Or even the fear of not having this upfront planning in place anymore. So essentially what we have is that Agile is wanted pretty much everywhere. Not many companies are really successful in there, and this is for me where Management 3.0 really can be of help, because it provides this thinking and tools and practices for management. Well, let's look at this quote of Peter Drucker. Management is about human beings. Its task is to manage people capable of joint performance, to make their strengths effective and their weakness irrelevant. This is what organizations is all about, and this is the reason that management is the critical determining factor. So if you look at that, and if you think about, we say that product development is a complex thing to do, but I think a company is even more complex, or companies are complex adaptive system where you have kind of non-linear causalities happening. And that basically means that management cannot be linear either, like putting something into place and repeating it over again is most likely not going to work. So what this actually boils down to, and this is kind of also what Peter Drucker is saying, because he manages management. There is not one word about manager. So what we say, kind of management as an activity is important. Managers, less. Maybe you have good managers who know how to do management, but it's the activity management which is important, not the managers themselves. So managers are a verb, managers are noun. And I think this is really also nice in alignment with one of the Agile principles from the Agile Manifesto, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, because this is what management enables, that people can really work together and they can interact and it works for them. And this is more important than processes and tools, and that's often what managers put in place. They put processes in place and they give you certain tools to work with. Again, this is the different mindset. So maybe some of you are kind of looking like this guy right now and saying, hey, but I'm a manager. Gosh, what does this mean to me? What can I do? And I'll provide a little bit of help with that. And here we have Martie, the management monster, which was introduced in his first book. So Martie has 6 eyes, and each one of those eyes is looking at a specific area, kind of working with teams within an organization. We have Energize People, empower teams, align constraints, develop competence, grow structure, and finally improve everything. And in this presentation, I'll go through a couple of those and give you some ideas about how you can use and leverage those. So let's look a little bit into energizing people. So we have moving motivators as a practice, or KUDO Cards. So let's look into the moving motivators. And you can see here there's a link up here. So if you click on that link, if you download the PDF afterwards, you will be linked directly to the Management 3.0 website, and then where the practice is also being explained. So back to moving motivators. So we have here those motivators, and the idea is that you as a manager, you would have those cards. You can order them online at Management 3.0 and ask the person, hey, just lay it left to right. What's least important to the left, what's most important to the right. And here we could, for example, see status is the least important, curiosity is the most important. So it's status, acceptance, order, freedom, relatedness, honor, mastery, power, goals, and curiosity. And this gives you a good idea as a manager about, how's this person thinking, what's really important for the person. Sure, you could just talk about it and make notes, but this is more like an active exercise where you collaborate more, and it also engages more the right side of your brain. And maybe you have some changes happening in your company. Maybe you span up another team, or you merge 2 teams, or something else changes. And then you can later on ask this person, how did this change, affect your motivations? Maybe some things stay the same, other things improve, other things go down. Like things which is improving, the cards would be moved up, and the other elements cards would be moved down. And then again, this gives you as a manager a good feeling, like, what's the impact of that? Is it good? Is it bad? Is there something I could do? And if you think about that, if you would do that with every individual team member within your team, you might even discover some patterns that some things are getting worse over time and other things are improving, and it could give you a lead about possible options you have at hand in order to change that. So as I said, initially it was thought of this exercise as a one-on-one thing. What I'm seeing right now is that it's more like a team exercise. You take a big table, you give people all those cards, and they lay it out, and they talk to each other. They actually, hey, this is what's important for me, what's important for you, and open flat communications. And they can even then move the cards around what they think would have an impact if this would be changed, or actually they do it later on and see what's the impact about that. So this is moving motivators, and I think it's a really kind of simple, good practice to get insights into how people's minds and in general how they're working and thinking. KUDO Cards, that's from the Greek word kidos, if I pronounce that right. It means to say appreciates what renown, what something have done. And what I have done, for example, I went out to the management through a website and I ordered 1,000 of those cards. And wherever I go on a project or as a coach, I take a stack with me and I put them on a table and I ask people to say thank you for certain things, or to tell people what they liked. And like, for example, I'm very happy to be a member of this great Scrum.org trainer community. I mean, I'm glad that I have this chance right now here to talk about Management 3.0. I appreciate how well it's organized, how well it's run. It's a great job, I think, what people are doing here. So this is just a simple way to say thank you. And I strongly believe that this is one of the things we don't do often enough. And often if we do it, it's not really meant. It's just like, hey, thanks. But if you say thank you, always say why. Thank you for doing this, or thank you for having helped me there. I think this is an important practice I actually learned on my own by using those cards. As a matter of fact, I have a stack of those cards in my kitchen as well. And whenever something happens in a family, maybe just my daughter writes down, hey, thank you, Mom, for this nice meal you cooked yesterday. It was really good. And they put it on the fridge. Or maybe I make a card to one of my daughters and saying, hey, thanks for helping me in the backyard yesterday. Again, it's a simple thing. There's actually a website for KUDO Cards online where you can do the same thing. But I strongly believe if you have the chance to do it with physical cards, do it really with physical cards. And maybe set even up a thank you wall in your team room if you have a chance for doing that. So these are the KUDO cards. Let's look into empowering teams. And here I want to show you kind of two practices, Delegation Poker and the Delegation Board. Delegation Poker. I mean, probably most of you have done planning poker, where you estimate the effort of specific product backlog items in your product backlog. And Delegation Poker is very similar. It's about to which level is certain decisions delegated. And you have 7 levels, like 1, tell. You as a manager, you would tell the team, this is how we do it. And 7, it's the opposite end. It's like you just tell them, hey, find a solution, just do it. Let's look a little bit deeper into detail. So the card 1, 2, 3, they're pretty much kind of management driven, where the manager makes a decision. The cards 5, 6, 7 is more like where the team makes a decision. And the card number 4 is neutral territory. That's basically we have to find an agreement together. Nobody has the last word on it. So on level 1, tell. So I as a manager would just say, this is how we do it, period. Sell, I would tell, hey, this is how we do it. Because of, and I would give them a reason. Hopefully, you're selling it to them so that they understand and accept it. Level 3 is that probably I would go out to the team and ask them a couple of questions. I say, you know what, I have to make a decision in this area here. What do you think? And so on. I would just kind of, collect input for them. But at the end, after having consulted them, I would make the decision. Again, level 4 is neutral territory. That's where kind of we have to work something out together. And then 5, 6, 7 is more like on the team side. So I, as a manager, I would provide advice. I would try to influence them. But at the end of the day, they make their own decision. 6 is when the team makes a decision and they tell me which decision they made and why they made that. And 7 is like complete delegation towards the development team. So 1, 2, 3 is manager side. 5, 6, 7 is on the team side. It's kind of like mirrored, if you want to look at it this way. So for me, the interesting thing about planning delegation poker was that often in trainings we say, hey, just go ahead, ask the development team, or tell them to find a solution for that. So the first time I did this delegation poker, I thought, oh, I was just bringing a 7, 7, 7, 7. And suddenly I realized, no, that's not what I want to do. For some things I would just try to, advise them, give them some strong input about what's important. So I'm not kind of just delegate it completely to them. Or in other things, I just say, hey, maybe consulting is even the right thing. So you suddenly, once you really start to think about that, and once you really kind of, have to say, this is how we will do it from now on for the near future. I mean, you can change it anytime, but for now, it makes you think different. And the interesting thing I also saw is that even the development team necessarily doesn't want to have everything delegated to them. At some point, they just, you know what? We want to heavily consult you. We want to provide input. But at the end, we want you to make this decision because we can't really, we don't want to do it yet. So this gives also a little bit of insight about how people are thinking currently, how much the trust level or failure culture is established in your enterprise. So again, it's a good practice and like in planning poker, where the conversation is the important part, it's the same thing about delegation poker, because if you look at the outliers, kind of wire 1, wire 7, you talk about it, you get a good understanding. At the end, you agree on one of those, and this is what you have right now. And you could always go back, maybe in a retrospective, and change it if you have new insights. But whatever your decisions is, you can then easily put on a delegation board. Maybe you have this area in your team room again where you can put that on and then basically say, like, selecting features, this is kind of, I would advise the product owner, but at the end of the day, the product owner has the last word. And or let's say the creation of the holiday schedule. This is kind of, the team would decide on their own how they do it, how they arrange that. But at the end of the day, they would tell me kind of what they've come up with. So then it's a simple way to put it on there. And maybe you can see also, like, if you take photos of that board over time, how this is changing over time, how things might improving, or maybe you even see that it's getting worse, and then you could think about why is this happening, and you can take actions about that. So that's delegation poker and the delegation board, something I'm really fond of. Let's look a little bit into aligning constraints. So we have there identity symbols, personal maps, and values. And with identity symbols, so what it means is essentially, once you have a development team or a team for several teams for a product, let them come up with a symbol, a logo, something. Here we have, for example, I think this horse means Ferrari, so it's meant like maybe they want to do something because they do something fast, or which makes something faster, so they choose a symbol for themselves, and that's a good way because they can identify with that, and that's helps to form one of those communities where people kind of identify with and really start to work for. I've seen that really dominant when I was working through ThoughtWorks at Google. That it's all of their products essentially, they had like a logo somewhere in the area that people were working together. Sometimes it was even a big flag they put up there, so it was kind of pride they showed through the identity symbol. And I think this is also a good way for teams to form, to grow together, to merge essentially from a group of people to a cohesive team. Another one is personal map. So let's say you join a new team, or you're building a new team, and you don't kind of, people maybe have seen each other before, but they don't know each other. That's a personal map. You just ask the people, throw in your name in this center, and then to each one of those bubbles, maybe what are your goals, where have you studied, what do you do at work, what are your hobbies, family, and so on, to fill it out quickly. But this exercise also has a twist, because it's not that they just fill it out and they're ready to other people. Once they have filled it out, you ask them to now give it to the person to your left, clockwise. And then this person to the left would then introduce the person to the right. So let's say, for example, I fill it out like that. And then let's say Peter is sitting left to me, and I will say, hey, I'm Peter, and I'm now going to introduce Ralph to you. He's currently living in Bern, Switzerland. He has been using Scrum since 2002. For him, honesty is really an important value. He has not too many friends, but some good friends kind of all over the globe. So whenever he travels, he sometimes have a chance to meet up with one of those. He is married, has 2 daughters, and also a dog. His hobbies are cooking and running, and kind of you would go through that. And sometimes people have a hard time reading some other one's handwriting, so you would go in and help them out a little bit. Again, this is a good activity to start to group more closely together. So this is a personal maps, and I actually sometimes use those if I give in-house trainings at a client, because often people know each other, but they don't really know each other that well. And then personal map is a good exercise to do. Maybe not perfect for public training because you would give it out to another person, so maybe this wouldn't be the best thing to do, but whenever it's in-house within one company, great thing to do. Values. Once the team has kind of established and is there as a cohesive team, you could think about what's important for us. I mean, at the beginning, it's like, hey, we have to crank out the software, we have to get it done and so on. But once you have this under control, you know how to do that. You can go up a level higher. You can ask yourself, what's important for us? What are our values? And this was with one team. And then you see here the values on the right-hand side. And this wasn't just a boilerplate exercise where we wrote those words down and everybody signed it. This went kind of through a couple of iterations until the wording was perfect, until everybody kind of really agreed with that. And then we signed it and we put it up in our team room. And whenever somebody wanted to join the team, maybe even internal transfer or an external hire, we just put them in front of this wall and said, hey, this is us. This is us. If you like that, if you associate, if you can see yourself working here, welcome. If not, you probably should think about another place. And the practice about coming up with that is probably also as important as the final result. Growth structure. So, we all heard about T-shaped people, and then I would introduce it to Meddlers quickly, one of those games we have. So T-shaped people is that we have a breadth of skills, and a speciality of maybe 1 or 2 skills. And essentially, the idea behind T-shaped people is actually something which came from the Navy SEALs. So anybody from a 6-person SEALs team knows how to do all of those things here. But there are specialists in one area. Maybe they're a sniper or a radio person. And this is where they're really good. But in the worst case, they can step in and do other activities as well. And this has a big benefit because if your T's look like that, essentially eyes, and you know only one thing, this leads to, if you say in a development team up to 9 people maximum, suddenly 9 is a small number because you have for everything you need to have in your product, you need to have one skill, essentially, one person, and then 9 is reached really quickly. And then if one of the persons maybe goes on a vacation or on a holiday, everything stalls because a skill is lacking. So this is one of the important aspects. And one of the other things is that if you think about, sometimes what I see, if I have eyes in my team, that if you have the daily scrum and people talk what they're doing, and the other ones, they're there, they hear what's being said, but they don't understand it because they have no clue. So the T also provides the possibility to communicate together, to understand, because this overlap within the T's helps us to appreciate what the other persons are doing and following up and connecting the dots. And what I've like to do is kind of early on is to make a skill matrix where you just say we're building this product, what are the skills we need to do this, and we just write everything down. And then this is the rows, and then on the columns we would then basically put the people in the team and just see who knows what. And then you often identify certain areas where we have knowledge islands, ice essentially, and then you could mitigate that, spread the knowledge through pair programming and practices like that. And the last thing I'd like to show you and just quickly run through is called Meddlers. If you're into board games, you probably have played a German board game called the Settlers of Catan, die Siedler von Catan in German, where you have those plates you put together, and it's the same idea. Like you say, for example, I have several customers, I'm building specific products, and I have so many developers, I have so many product owners, and so on. And you would then basically try to arrange kind of how would you connect your customers to the team, where would be where. You have those interfaces essentially where the cards come together. You could put something on there. So It's a very gamified exercise in that regard, but it's really helpful because suddenly you realize what your constraints are with the number of peoples you have, and how you could make it work. And if you have several tables within the room and you have other people kind of coming up with their own solution, and you just then walk through the room and you see how they thought compared with how you thought, it's a good exercise again to get a common understanding and to come up with one solution, which is probably a very good solution to start off with. But then at the end of the day, you still have to inspect and adapt. So, and there are many, many more. So there's a link. If you click on that link here, you would go to the Management CEO website and you would see a list of all the practices that I've collected there over time. So these are the books which are out there. I showed you the first one, Management 3.0, Addison Wesley. Then later on, he came out with this book, How to Change the World. It's probably more a booklet. It's around 100 pages. Again, it's an interesting read, some new ideas in there and practices. And his latest books from Jürgen Apollo, it's Games, Tools, and Practices, where you can have other ideas about how to do certain things. It's building on top of what is already kind of established in the Management 3.0 in the first book. So thank you very much. That would be my quick run through Management 3.0, what it is and how you could leverage that within your company. And be open for questions right now. And I'm looking at the window. Let's see what is there. Eric, could you also kind of help me a little bit here?
Sure. Thanks, everybody. And please, if you have further questions, feel free to enter them into the window as Ralph speaks. First question, and I find it. I think you'll have fun with this one. Are there any best practices available to empower teams to continuously improve the velocity? I'm sure you're going to touch on the fact that value is much more important than velocity, but I'll leave it to you, Ralph.
Okay, yeah, I mean, yeah, this was my first thought, and thanks, Eric, for kind of giving me the answer already. So, velocity is one aspect, and think about let's take velocity as a metaphor. Like, it doesn't help if you have a Ferrari with a really high velocity, but you drive in the wrong direction. You just get to the wrong place faster. So it's all about value, about making sure you close as quickly, as frequently the feedback loop with your customers, your stakeholders, your end users, and you learn from them, and you can put the learn back into your product backlog, into your process, how you work. So I think the Management 3.0 practices are there to help you to improve your velocity. But again, velocity is not a goal in itself. It's a mean to an end, which is basically delivering value to your customer. And again, Management 3.0 also helps you to identify value. Okay.
Here's an interesting one, and you may have some thoughts on this. Why is it called Management 3.0?
I cited at the very beginning. I mean, Jürgen Apollo, he sees it as the third iteration of management. So the first version, kind of like what we've done like 100 years ago, classical command and control, Frederick Taylor, you are human resource, you're one of the wheels in an assembly line, you do one thing, but what you do is you're being told, you're not kind of allowed to think or come up with own initiatives. Management 2.0 was about empowering people to be people again, but it was still classical command structure, classical hierarchies within enterprises. So it didn't really work. And Management 3.0 is kind of like the third iteration of management styles, where we don't have hierarchies anymore, but we have more like communities, teams working empowered together, collaborating with other teams. So this is the idea behind Management 3.0. It's and I think it's kind of because companies themselves, I mean, we say products we develop are complex. Probably companies are even more complex. So a linear management approach doesn't work. And this is what Management 3.0, through the community thinking, through the practices, is trying to enable.
Great, thanks, Ralph.
Okay.
Another question, how do you approach management as a consultant for the delegation game when the delegation terms are defined in a pre-existing contract, for example?
Well, if it's a pre-existing contract and it's signed and it's not changeable, it's a tough spot to be in. But normally, I asked him, so who is making this decision? And I get an answer. Or, well, I ask kind of, often you have those racy metrics in place, like who's responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted and informed. And it just say, you know what, this is good, this is already there, but no, it's given to the people. I mean, it's just like, this is how we work, this is what you have to do. And I try to talk them a little bit into, hey, now we have to make this decision. Who should be best do that? And then I bring up, but wouldn't it be good to ask the development team as well? Probably they have some ideas about what this means on the technology side. Shouldn't we kind of pull them in as well? And then slowly just say, you know what, actually, have you ever heard about planning poker? And most of them have by now. I just say, there's a nice exercise. It's called Delegation Poker. And I would be happy to run a session with you. So I'll organize a room and you come in and then we talk about that. And then I'll introduce you to Delegation Poker. And once you have that going, I think they sit there and they talk to the people and they understand. They suddenly realize that the people in the development team really are serious. They're asking the good questions. They're also asking the hard questions. And together, you're capable of coming up with a better idea. And again, delegation poker is not just about handing everything over to the development team. You have nuances in between, and usually sometimes it's a 1, sometimes it's a complete delegation 7, but very often you're somewhere in the middle. Okay.
So another question around product ownership. I know it's near and dear to your heart. How can I motivate the team to become more T-shaped? Are there any best practices that you have?
Well, often it's an experience. I had once a case where one of the guys, he had the flu and he was out for a big chunk of the sprint, and essentially the team couldn't complete anything. And then in the retrospective, we went through that and just say, so what would we have had to mitigate that problem? And well, the skill, and then this is how we came up with the skill metrics. So at this point, the team learned from basically having run a sprint against the wall that they need to change there. And we did it we made this knowledge transfer through pair programming. But let's say you have an environment where things are people that haven't had this problem so far yet. Look at the daily scrum. If one person is doing one thing and they basically talk to themselves in the daily scrum because nobody else is really understanding what they're doing, talking about right now, just ask them at the end of the daily scrum, so does everyone understand what everybody else is doing? Could you take that over? What happens if this person wouldn't show up tomorrow? Just slowly get them into that. And also one of the signs is if you have I-shaped people is that your burn down in the sprint, your sprint burn down is kind of often like a cliff. It's a flat line until the very last day. It goes down, or maybe it doesn't even go down because people are 90% done with what they do as an I. But then I ask them again, so how can we make more like a staircase burn down, that we have something done every other day, that we make progress in that regard, and it gives us more chance to, once we show it to the product owner, to inspect and adapt and make the last touch-ups if there is something needed. So these are the tactics I personally go through in order to make it obvious to the people that being T-shaped is actually good for them right now in a given context, but I also think being more like a T in general makes you much more valuable on the market. So I think everybody should appreciate that.
So Ralph, when it comes to the delegation board, what's the best way to come up with a list of, say, key decision areas? Any tools, any ideas you might have to be able to construct that list as teams are working with product managers and others?
Okay, let me just go there back quickly. There we go. Here we have the obvious ones, like who's going to select the features we put into a sprint, who creates, maybe this is the release schedule or the holiday schedule. I think in this case it's the holiday schedule because it's team driven. Who's selecting new team members? But then on the other hand, just look into maybe do a sprint and one of the retrospective looks back and just say, what kind of decisions did we do in the last sprint? What kind of decisions we were struggling with, and why were we struggling? Because maybe we realized, hey, we needed an answer, but we thought we could give the answer, but we had to ask for our manager or somebody else to give us the final okay. So, and I think once you have this list, and this list is not a one-off that you do it once and that's it for the future. It's, you know, if you have new insights, you go ahead and you change it, you inspect and adapt. So again, use this as a starting point. It's a little bit, think about like your definition of done. There are certain things they're always good, you should always have in there, and other things you do depending on your context. And it's the same thing about the delegation board.
Great. So we'll take a few more. We've got a little bit of time left, and it looks like everybody's hanging on to listen, which is great. I want to ask, what about rewarding the team and motivating the team? Are there some examples you've used, some things you've seen that have worked or that haven't worked and actually demotivated rather than motivating the team?
So there's this concept, I haven't talked about that, there's this concept of merit money. So the idea is that there's actually, I think now, open source tools out there, websites which you can use, but you could also just do it in an Excel sheet. Let's say, for example, every sprint you get, let's say, 20 points, and you can spread them out. You can just say, hey, Eric, you helped me organize this, so I give you 5 points. Peter, you helped me for that, I give you 2 points, and you spread out your points. And the other people do it also for the other team members. So essentially, it's like a way to say thank you for helping me out on certain occasions. And you can then collect those points, and let's say maybe you get your department gets some bonus from the company every 6 months, depending on how the business is going. Let's say you get a lump sum, and then now you have to spread it out instead of maybe just going by job title or how many percent kind of this means for your income and so on. You would then just go to this Excel sheet and just see, okay, well, we spread out, let's say 100 points over the last 3 months, and that means 1 point is so many dollars, and then you would basically give it so much how everybody has as points. So, and this is a way to, I think, distribute it evenly, because this is a way how the team rewards itself for being there for each other, supporting them. And I think it's also good feedback in the regard, if you haven't gotten lots of points from other team members throughout the last 6 months, maybe it's a sign that you could be more helpful, or maybe use that as a self-reflection. So this is a way about distributing bonuses, probably in a fairer way. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but the places I've been doing that, I think it works pretty well. Because I think all of you have probably heard about or read the book of Dan Pink, Drive, and there he is really making a clear point that rewards don't work in the classical way. But if you still want to reward people, I think merit money is a good way to do that. Other things what I've seen is that the team basically got the money themselves as a team within the company, but it wasn't their money. It was like money they could use in the team, so they could do anything with it. Maybe they could buy a big flat screen TV or a coffee machine or new computers or whatever they wanted. Essentially, it was like their toy money for within the team, and that also kind of helped to for the team to change over time and get things that they wanted but couldn't afford because the budget wasn't there. So again, this is different thinking. Bonuses are complicated. I think more and more companies are also realizing that, but there's this idea, this practice of merit money in Management 3.0.
So staying with the money theme, but kind of a little bit different. Many software projects, upper management still requires that upfront approach to define budget and schedules and so on. But then you're tasked to use Agile, in quotes, and make it happen under that budget. Have you seen companies truly using Agile to get money for projects?
I mean, this really goes back to the structure of a company. I mean, often what we see is that, you know, you still have your annual plans, your annual budgets, where you have to tell them 12 months ahead how much money you need and how long it will take. But on the other hand, then you want to work Agile, and that's just like oil and vinegar. It doesn't really mix and stay kind of mixed. It always separates again. It doesn't work together. And so I think some companies are getting it. Some companies, they go into a more rolling budget thinking, where they just look like 3 months ahead, and you know, and then they redistribute money on a as needed, as I see fit basis. But then again, this is kind of this idea about management 3.0 to help people to get out of this classical thinking to open their eyes that there are some practices out there. And I mean, this is less management 3.0. I think this is more like classical Scrum territory. But if you really, go more towards value thinking, then instead of making progress regarding your requirements, your scope, schedule, budget thinking. I mean, the problem is that you could really be on scope, on time, on budget, but have built the wrong product. But you are a good project manager because you were really kind of in this triangle. You did really well. To get more to this value thinking, and we have the reviews for that. If you every other week, if you show a working piece of working product, an increment to your stakeholders, to sales, to marketing, that's the best transparency they can have. And once you've closed that feedback loop, it becomes easier for companies to start to think different with their budgets. And I watched a talk of a guy of Statoil. That's the Norwegian $200 billion oil company, if I remember the numbers right now. And they basically went from annual budgeting to a rolling budget. So if an oil company is capable of doing that, why shouldn't a smaller software company able to do that?
So kind of getting back to some of what was in the presentation here and some of the examples that you used, can you talk about the celebration grid as a management 3.0 tool for retrospectives?
Celebration grid. I'm drawing a blank on that one right now, to be honest.
Okay, well we can come back to that. That's fine.
Yeah.
So,
any other questions?
Yeah, well, let's take one more here. So how do you deal with a micromanager that is slowing down the velocity, back to velocity, with multiple questions per day to the development team, publicly shaming the development team during the sprint planning phase, and override decisions as the product manager, and ultimately hurting the team's attitude? Looks like they need a strong Scrum master here.
Yes, I mean, if you have a manager micromanaging the team, they're not really capable of self-organization. They wouldn't kind of. I just recently read a study that if the manager is sitting with the team, it's actually not necessarily the best thing because you feel observed all the time, and it makes you more compliant in a negative meaning because you then really do what you were expected to do. But sometimes you know how to do things better, how to be more efficient, more effective in several ways. And there are studies that if they just put a curtain between the manager and the team, the productivity went up. And this is, I think, the problem of micromanagement, because the name is saying it, micromanagement. If you really tell all the details, you stifle innovation. You don't allow the team to properly self-organize. They don't take accountability for their own decisions. It's finger pointing. If it doesn't work at the end of the day, they tell you, well, this is what you told us to do. But what I'm doing right now is I'm just pointing out all the problems of micromanagement. But if you now have a manager who is micromanaging, how can you get this person changed? Yeah, and this is a tough question. I don't think there is the answer. I think there's some practices you could show to the manager, some ideas. It's continuous nagging with the person to trying to get their mind changed. Maybe get them sent to a training, or maybe bring in have a good Scrum Master who has a good way to communicate and work with that person to slowly open his or her eyes. It's complex, and we all know what complexity means is there is not the answer. There's good ideas, and you need to start to work with some of them and frequently inspect and adapt and see how it is working. I think at the end of the day, Agile is all about building trust. And if a manager is doing micromanagement, I see a big lack of trust. Trust is missing. So maybe one question you could ask yourself as a development team: what could we do to build trust?
That's great. And while we ended on that, I think we've pretty much hit our time box, Ralph. If you do have further questions, you can see up on the screen there Ralph's email address. Feel free to reach out to him. He's a busy man. I know he's actually in the U.S. this week. working on some things, but reach out via email. I'm sure he's happy to help you and answer your questions, or maybe even come in and help. With that, again, I'd like to thank you for taking your time today, and have a good rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Thank you.